Hi guys, hi everyone. Thanks very much for being there for the part number three, the aftermath. So just to provide a quick recap, on part number two, on the flame, what we did is to look at the the key events, the turning points, and the leadership, and the differences that was existing in nature of the revolution, the background, the background story, and also the past that was fueling the passage to a rebellion and to a revolution. Rebellion more on the American side, and on the French side, it is more like a real revolution because you changing fundamentally the social structure and everything. And there was a key differences in the um, in the leadership, but also that was highlighting certain difference naturally within the in the conclusion that we did yesterday. So now part number three, let me share my screen quickly and we'll get cracking on that. But so the aftermath, it's really about understanding the immediate and long-term consequences of both revolution. These part will be slightly longer than the part number two because there's much more to say on both sides and more on the French side as a disclaimer, just because the history of France is actually way richer than the American side. As I said, the lapse of time of the American colony per se is significantly shorter than the history of France, which takes us back 1,000 years before the revolution. So naturally, there's more to say about this, right? So this is the main reason. Okay, let's be cracking. And once again, you will see every single subsection of that part. You will have naturally where we are in order for you to stay connected to what I'm highlighting. Okay. So now let's be starting. So part number three, the aftermath. Okay. So the American Revolution, the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence adopted by the Continental Congress on July 4th, 1776 is a foundational document of the United States. It articulated the colonist grievances against British rule and declared their independence. In that Declaration of Independence, there's multiple elements that are important. Natural rights. The declaration is grounded on the philosophy of natural rights, asserting that all men are created equal and endowed with inalienable rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The social contract theory. The document draws upon John Locke's social contract theory, arguing that governments derive their just power from the consent of the governed. So you need to have the public support in order to do something. Otherwise, this is a dictatorship. Grievances against the king. The declaration lists specific grievances against King George III, including taxation without representation, something that we've tackled in part number one and part number two, the dissolution of colonial legislature, and the quartering of British troops in private homes. Okay. And the quartering of British troops in private homes. Okay. So, Declaration of Independence served as a rallying cry for the American people and the blueprint for the new nation. Its principle of self-government, individual rights, and limited government will continue to shape American democracy. This is why this is also an important topic today. Limited government and everything, it's an important topic for the 2024 election that is coming soon. Okay. So now, the American Revolution, a new nation. The American Revolution culminated in the establishment of the United States of America, a new nation founded on the principles of liberty, equality, and self-governance. The Constitution, ratified in 1787, established a federal republic with a system of checks and balances. First of all, social and political changes. The revolution led to significant social and political changes, such as the abolition of the slavery in some states and the expansion of voting rights. However, these changes were not immediate or universal. Okay, economic challenges. The war for independence left the new nation with a substantial debt. The young nation faced economic challenges, and it sought to establish a stable economy and trade relationships with different countries. So you see now, this is a transition from there's the Declaration of Independence. It's more the grievances and the separation from the British Empire. Now, the Constitution established the notion of a new nation. It's really a transition that doesn't exist in the French Revolution, and you will see why. It's just because the past of the USA is actually of a former colony. So first of all, you win the war against the British Empire, which is not a small feat. You win the war, and naturally you want to, stop the relationship as a colony. It doesn't mean that you will not do business with them. Of course not. You will continue to do business because this is a brother country, so to speak, right? So now you're establishing a new nation with a new vision about what it will be, okay? And it's ratified in 1787, which is quite interesting because if you look at the Declaration of Independence, if you look at the Declaration of Human Rights between the French Revolution and the American Revolution, this is quite close, right? So naturally, you see influence on both sides, okay, in terms of vision, in terms of philosophical ideals, and actually the establishment of a new nation that will be fundamentally different from what it was as a colony. And naturally, trades and relationships, it means everyone is on board. The British Empire, the French Empire will be trading with the USA, with this newly founded nation. Now, if we want to go back a little bit on Native Americans, and this is what we were talking about on part number 2. Now, let's talk about the American Revolution and Native Americans, because we were saying that during the military phase of the revolution, Native Americans were either aligning themselves with the British Empire, or sometimes also aligning themselves with the colonists. So now we need to appreciate what was happening for them. So the American Revolution and Native Americans. The American Revolution had a profound and often devastating impact on Native American populations. While some tribes allied with the colonies, as I said, also supported sometimes the British or attempted to remain neutral, as we said in part number 2. Regardless of their position, the war resulted in significant losses and disruptions. First of all, loss of land. The Treaty of Paris, which ended the Revolutionary War, ceded vast territories to the United States, leading to the displacement of numerous Native American tribes. Forced relocation. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 authorized the forced relocation of Native Americans to land west of the Mississippi River, resulting in the infamous Trail of Tears, which is really famous, in American history. The cultural assimilation. The US government pursued policies of cultural assimilation, seeking to force Native Americans to abandon their traditional ways of life and adopt European customs. So not only they were moving, the American Revolution moved these people from their original land, but also killed, their culture. And this was also quite a quite a different, quite a difficult, pill to swallow for the Native Americans. While the American Revolution was a struggle for independence and self-determination, its consequences for Native Americans were often tragic. Many tribes faced dispossession, cultural erasure, and violence. Violence against, naturally, reproduction, killing the woman, killing the kids, to make sure that there was no continuous rebellion from the Native Americans. That's the truth. Sometimes it can be hurtful to hear the truth, but it was an attempt of a genocide against the Indian Americans. Now, suspicion of corruption in the American Revolution. This is not a part I take pleasure to use, but it's a reality. It's a reality that corruption, when you have a transitioning state from one state that was a former colony, and you could see people enriching themselves, enjoying prosperity on the British Empire side due to monopolies. So as soon as you transition to something else, there's an attempt to take advantage of it naturally. And it is not about the colonists or the American people. It's in the nature of human beings, and that will be something extremely similar to the French situation and the French Revolution. So as you will see, the level of corruption on the French side will be extremely high as well, and actually on the larger scale than what you will see from the American side. So suspicion of corruption in the American Revolution. While the American Revolution was generally characterized by a commitment to Republican ideals and limited government, there were instances of corruption and abuse of power. So financial mismanagement. The Continental Congress, the governing body of the American colonies, struggled to manage finances during the war. This led to accusations of corruption and mismanagement of funds. Patronage system. After the war, the new American government faced challenges in establishing a fair and an equitable system of appointments, meaning that you will give, projects or assignment to people. So patronage, the practice of awarding government positions to political supporters, became a source of contention. So if you were a political opponent, you will not get any opportunities. But if you are a sympathizer, then in that case, yeah, there will be some bread coming your way. Okay. This is the logic of affiliation between parties. This is actually the beginning of the separation of the two parties that is now today the Democrat and the Republicans. Now the neutral party or the independent party doesn't exist as such, because you either are a sympathizer or you are an opponent. There's nothing in between these two definitions. Corruption scandals. Several scandals involving government officials and financial wrongdoing emerged in the early years of the Republic. These cases raised concerns about the integrity of the new government. A good example of that is the Whiskey Rebellion. The Whiskey Rebellion of 1794 was a protest against a federal tax on whiskey imposed by the Washington administration. The tax primarily affected Western farmers who relied on whiskey production for livelihoods. Opposition of the tax. The Western farmers argued that the tax was unfair and discriminatory, and as it disproportionately burdened rural producers, they organized protest and refused to pay the tax. As a federal response, President George Washington sent federal troops to quell the rebellion, demonstrating the federal government authority to enforce its laws. The political consequences The Whiskey Rebellion was a test to the new American Republic. The federal government decisive response helped to solidify its authority and dispel tiers of weak central government. So, while the American Revolution was generally seen as a more honest and transparent process compared to the French Revolution, it was not without its own challenges related to corruption and abuse of power. And you can largely imagine that the Whiskey Rebellion was a good example of that. So what was happening on the eastern side, and this is something that the naturally the how the people responded, the Western farmers responded to these tax was naturally, felt discriminatory, and this was perhaps the response that was extremely violent and harsh on these protests to refuse to pay the tax. Okay, and we'll see that the French Revolution is no different in that regard. Okay, guys, let's move on to French Revolution. So what I wanted to go back to is to give like a short recap about the situation in France and the expectation from the population was in order to see things to change in France. So first of all, the social inequality and economic hardship of the third estate. So the French Revolution was fueled, as I was saying, for a deep-seated social inequality that had lasted for centuries. So the third estate, comprising the vast majority of the population, they were supporting the almost all the tax burden and enjoying minimal or no political representation or participation. Okay, you could have some level of participation due to the middle class, interactions with the nobility, but that's it. The middle class was in the possibility to join the nobility by intermarriage, but also by alliances. So they could be buying some charges. So buying the charges means you can buy the right to occupy a certain position in a society. Some roles and positions were reserved to the nobility or the clergy. So in order to get access to them, you needed to pay and large sum of money. And the middle class was in the capability of doing that. Okay. So the disparity coupled with economic hardship and the spread of alignment ideas created a volatile situation ripe for revolution. That's what I was explaining before. The social inequality with the three estates. French society was divided into three estates. First, the clergy, second, the nobility, and finally the third estate. Okay. So the economic exploitation. So the way you can actually see that is the fact that the third estate was exploited by both the clergy and by the aristocracy through feudal dues and obligation. The system of feudalism further exacerbated the economic inequality in reality. The reality for these people is that they were really seriously at the limit of the survival or the surviving level. This is the reality of it. Okay. So now the status of the old regime. Since Charlemagne reigned from 768 to 814, the social construct was made as such. As I said, clergy first, second nobility, aristocracy, and the third estate. Okay. According to Albert Sobrul books, The French Revolution, it's one of my favorite book. It's a fantastic book that is deepening the view of the economy and the society at the time of the French Revolution. By the time of the revolution, demographically, the nobility was about 350,000 people, including 4,000 nobles of court living in Versailles as the close entourage of the king. The nobility was seriously indebted, and was gradually joining the bourgeoisie for wealth accumulation through marriages or joint ventures. So they were doing business together. They were doing also sharing the charge, as I was saying. The clergy was about 120,000 people, was by far the largest landowner in France. And at the time, it was largely taking advantage of it by pushing the taxes upon the third estate. It was separated between the high clergy, where all the members were from the nobility, actually, and the low clergy, mostly from the third estate. So you see, you even have within the clergy two levels. You have the high class and the lower class, and on the high class of the clergy, you see people coming from the nobility. On the lesser class of the clergy, people are coming from the third estate. So both clergy, those who pray, and the nobility, those who supposedly fight, they were fighting at the time of Charlemagne. At the time of the modern time, they don't fight anymore. Okay, but they were fully exempted from paying any taxes. No, now you understand what I mean. It's really 100% of the tax responsibility is upon the third estate. The third estate was, on the other end, about 26 million people, and they were highly subjected to direct, indirect taxes, as I was explaining before. You know, the la taille, initially used in the 15th century to support the 100 Years' War for the military service. Then you have the gabelle, the salt tax, custom tax for trading wine, tobacco, etc. The composition of the third estate was way more diverse than the two other estates. Artisans, traders, lawyers, notary, and naturally the high level of the bourgeoisie, which was very close to the nobility, the general farmers, the bankers, the finance people, and the international commerce, which were making a fortune out of the slaves trade and products from the colonies. Okay. Now, economic hardship. First of all, taxation. The heavy burden of the taxation on the third estate, as I said on multiple occasions. Inefficient government. The monarchy's mismanagement of finances and costly wars exacerbating economic problems. You know, the war from Louis XIV, the Spanish Succession War, the war under Louis XV, basically the 7 Years' War in Canada, and then the American Revolution. So these were the wars supported by Louis XV and Louis XVI. Now the food shortages. Periodically, food shortages and rising prices further strain the lives of the common people. To give an example, bread was an essential part of the food intake for people at the time. Most social riots between 788 and 789 were because of the bread cost rise and due to organized scarcity of grains to artificially bring the cost of the bread to rise and profit from it. So the general farmers, this is what they were doing. They were saying that the grains were turning bad, so they couldn't produce more bread. So the bread artificially rose on price, and naturally they were profit from it. But in reality, the grains were there, and they were just creating the scarcity of the grains to profit from it. So the spread of Enlightenment ideas, as I said, in part number 2 and part number 1, critique of the old regime, Enlightenment philosophers like Voltaire, Montesquieu, and Rousseau and Diderot, but also people like Benjamin Franklin that were sharing the vision about self-governance, the vision of, destroying the chains of the empire, and being no longer a colony, but to become a real nation. That was fueling the philosophical vision about what a society should be. Then this vision challenged the legitimacy of the monarchy and the privileges of the aristocracy, individual rights and equality. These philosophers advocated for individual rights, equality before the law, and limited government. So this is really similar to what we saw with John Locke vision, the vision of Montesquieu, Adam Smith. This is clearly a vision coming from the American Revolution that is actually fueling the revolution in France. Inspiration for revolution, the Enlightenment ideas inspired many to question the existing social and political order that is provided by whose organization? The Catholic Church, providing a theoretical framework for the revolutionary movement. You need to appreciate something there. Since the revocation of the Edict of Nantes by Louis XIV, most of the Protestants have left France. There's no longer Protestant vision in France. All these people have left to Holland, to Germany, to the Nordics, or they left in the US. There's no longer Protestant vision about the society. So this Protestant vision that was fueling the vision for the US to become more than a colony, but to become a nation, is not part of the vision that was pushed in the French Revolution. This vision was pushed by people like Benjamin Franklin or Marquis de Lafayette when he came back from the American Revolution. So naturally, this vision of the existing social and political order that was questioned by the Enlightenment ideas and philosophers, providing a theoretical framework for the revolutionary movement. Okay, so now to come back quickly on the different events that were pushing for the revolution to take place. The Estates General, once again, it's a body that didn't meet for 170 years. That was the spark of the real spark of the French Revolution, where people were questioning the authority of the king and saying that they were calling themselves the National Assembly. Okay, and they will not disband until they provide a constitution to France. In the tennis court oath, basically in the serment de jeu de paume in French, it's the oath of the tennis court. So people were saying, we're going to stick together until we provide a revolution. Now, because of all the tensions that were happening in Paris and surrounding Paris, there was the storming of the Bastille in July 14th, 1789. And then naturally, it was to also demonstrate that the monarchy could be just overthrown. So in the 4th of August, this was the end of the feudal system. Okay. Now the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. The National Assembly subsequently drafted the Declaration of the Rights of Men and of the Citizen, a document outlining the fundamental rights of all citizens, despite of the color or the origin. The Declaration was a cornerstone of the French Revolution and inspired revolutionary movement around the world. Now, the National Assembly produced a new constitution for France in 1791. The constitution established a constitutional monarchy, limiting the power of the king and granting greater rights to citizens. And now the king was not the king of France, he was the king of the French. Okay. However, the implementation of this constitution was fraught with challenges, and the revolutionary government faced ongoing instability. This is the big difference between the French Revolution and the War of Independence or the American Revolution. There's no stability. There was right after the War of Independence, there was more stability. It's not entirely, stable or peaceful, but at least you have a better stability on the American side. Now, the censal vote and the transfer of power. I was saying in part number 2 that the French Revolution was hiding something a little bit darker. Okay. There was, if you want to appreciate something, is that for a number of years, I would say about 200 years, the nobility was getting poorer and poorer. Why? Because they were spending way too much to be in the entourage of the king and to be showing the greatness of nobility. So they were spending quite a lot to maintain a certain lifestyle, and they were depending on the taxes that they would put on the lands to take advantage of the peasantry and also the third estate. In the meantime, the third estate, the bourgeoisie, what we call the middle class, basically, they were elevating themselves in terms of prosperity, wealth accumulation, and also influence. Influence because of money equals to power. Power and money together formalize influence. Okay, so now they were buying charges, so they will become also part of the nobility, because they were, these charges. The charges when you pay the possibility to occupy a certain role or position within the society, you become by de facto the possibility of getting a title. You become a count, you become a duke, you become whatever title you can imagine in aristocracy. You become a lord, so naturally you become part of the nobility. This is what we call the nobility of robes. Okay, and this was the possibility, and this is what you will see in this image, when you see the possibility for the member of the bourgeoisie to elevate themselves into nobility, right? So now, if you imagine that the vast majority of the bourgeoisie don't become part of the nobility, they have the money, they have the power, they have the influence, but not the political representation. So the goal is to have a transfer of power between the nobility to the bourgeoisie. So in reality, the control of the third estate will be moving from one side to the other. So this is why I'm talking about the darker side of the French Revolution. This is in reality a manipulation. So let me explain. The censal vote, a system used in France during the early years of the revolution, did indeed represent a transfer of power from the aristocracy to the bourgeoisie. However, it is important to note that this shift did not benefit the lower classes. The censal vote was instituted in 1791 under the constitutional monarchy before the death of the king Louis XVI. Continues in 1793 under the convention, in 1795 under the directory, and it also continued in 1799 under the consulate, and also in 1802 under Napoleon Bonaparte. And further down the road, you can see that to be continued in 1804 under the First Empire with Napoleon Bonaparte. And under the Restoration, under Louis the 18th, until 1830. So from 1791 to 1830, the censal vote was actually pushed and maintained. Now, what is the censal vote? Censal voting means under the censal vote system, the right to vote was restricted to those who met a certain property qualification. This effectively excluded the vast majority of the population, including the peasantry and urban workers. The bourgeoisie beneficiaries, the bourgeoisie with the accumulated wealth, were more likely to meet the property requirement and therefore gaining voting rights. This gave them a disproportionate influence over the political process. So what it means that, remember what I was saying, that the revolution seized the possession of the church. Then the possession of the church was generating new revenue stream. The revenue stream was that it was the possibility for the bourgeoisie to acquire land and properties from the church system that was seized by the revolution. So you see what I mean? So they were enriching themselves with land. And if you have a certain level of land, this will provide you the right to vote. If you are not an owner of land or owner of any kind, then in that case, you can't vote. So the peasantry and the urban workers were not accessing the vote. They were thinking that they were, free to gain liberty and then so also political participation. It was not the case. So in that case, what you can say, it's a limited democracy. Yes, indeed. The central vote system, while a step away from exclusive privileges of the aristocracy, did not create a true democratic system. It maintained a power imbalance that favored the wealthy and excluded the majority of the people or of the population. In conclusion, we can just say that the central vote represented a transfer of power from the aristocracy to the bourgeoisie and did not result in a more equitable and or inclusive political system. On the contrary, it was the same. It was a continuation for the lower classes. So the lower classes remained marginalized and excluded from meaningful participation in the political process until 1830. Now, the Revolutionary Wars. The French Revolution, driven by radical ideals and the desire for expansion, quickly embarked on the series of wars against neighboring European powers. They were claiming, oh, we were attacked, we need to react. But in reality, they were instigating the wars against the neighbors and the neighboring European powers in order to gain wealth, to gain territory. These wars, known as the Revolutionary Wars, had a profound impact on European and beyond. These elements, the French historians hide them because they don't want the central vote and the Revolutionary Wars. They don't necessarily, not all of them. Okay, some of them tell the truth, some others hide the truth. The reality is that the revolution was really tumultuous and really a transfer of power and also for greed and wealth accumulation. So what were the motivations of the Revolutionary Wars? The French government sought to spread revolutionary ideals, secure borders, and acquire resources and wealth, naturally. But wealth not for everyone, for those in power. Opponents. France faced opposition from a coalition of European powers, including Britain, Austria, and Prussia. To give an example, Prussia, in reality, Prussia was actually Germany, the different states composing Germany, and basically it will become a federated. It will become a federation or a real country by 1871 after the war between France and Germany, the first French-Germanic War. That will be the sequence that we know of. 1870 for the first war between France and Germany, and the First World War, and then the Second World War will be the continuation of the 1870 war between France and Germany. Okay. So yes, these were the opponents. Now the impact, the wars led to significant territorial changes and the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte as a military hero, because you didn't have enough officers, because officers will basically, betraying France to join the European powers, because they were thinking, well, the reality is that we should have a king and we shouldn't have a revolution. So in that case, we shouldn't have a democracy. Democracy is a fantasy. Let's move on to the opposite side. And they were dismissing themselves to work with the opposite side. And there was a limited number of generals and colonels to support the war efforts. So basically, it helped the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte as a military hero, and then after that as a consul, and after that as the emperor. Now the Vendée War. So this is also quite interesting because they're facing opposition externally, because they were igniting the opposition, as I said, with other powers, but they were also facing uprising internally. So the Vendée War. The Vendée War was a counter-revolutionary uprising in Western France, primarily driven by religious and social factors. So basically, people, they were part of the third estate, but they were estimating that the natural law and order, as a Catholic, we believe this is a king should be on top. A revolution doesn't make any sense, so we want to go back to the old regime. Okay. This region of the Vendée was mostly Catholic, and they were resistant to the policies that were pushed by the revolutionary government. So the government was pushing some ideas that were really the separation between the state and the Catholic Church, which was not really something that they wanted to see. Okay, so what was the main reason of the Vendée War? The religious persecution. The revolutionaries enacted laws that suppressed religious practices and confiscated church property. This led to the widespread resentment amongst the Catholic population. Here we go. This is what I was saying. Social and economic grievances. The Vendée region was also plagued by economic hardship and social inequality compared to Paris and other regions that were actually, richer. These factors contributed to the uprising. And it is, for most people, the Vendée War resembled to a genocide. So the conflict was marked by extreme violence on both sides. The revolutionary government employed brutal tactics, including the execution of prisoners and the burning of villages, rape, systemic rape. This has led some historians to categorize the Vendée War as a genocide. Okay, and this is a burning kind of subject in France, but yes, this is basically could be considered as a genocide. The civil constitution of the clergy. The civil constitution of the clergy, enacted in 1790, was a significant step in the secularization of France, nationalized church property, and subordinated the clergy to the state. So, first of all, opposition from the church. This measure was strongly opposed by the Catholic Church, which maintained its allegiance to the Pope, because they were asking for the church for the Catholic Church in France to realign its allegiance. Its allegiance shouldn't be to the Pope, but should be to the revolution. Schism. The civil constitution led to a schism within the French church, with some clergy refusing to swear allegiance to the state, to the revolution. Impact on the revolution. The church opposition to the civil constitution contributed to the growing radicalization of the revolution and the reign of terror, because they were opposing the revolution. So it led to something. We need to do something. And to do something means systematic execution of who opposed the revolution. These events highlight the complex and often tragic consequences of the French Revolution. As I said, it's really tumultuous, it's really complex. While the revolution sought to establish a more just and equitable society, it also led to widespread conflict, violence, and social upheaval. Now, we didn't talk too much about the royal family, the king and his family, what was happening to them. Okay, the fate of the royal family. So this is really interesting because what was happening to them, because the monarchy was just removed. The monarchy doesn't exist anymore. So he's not the king of France, he's the king of the French. He's like a constitutional monarchy. So he has limited power now. Okay. So the fate of the royal family. The French Revolution, marked by radicalism and violence, ultimately led to the execution of the King Louis XV, XVI, and Queen Marie Antoinette. Okay, now we need to explain why he was executed, because it wasn't seen that way initially. He was the king of the French, and people wanted to keep the king around. Actually, they didn't want to kill him, outright. Some people were pushing for it, but there was a strong support of keeping the king around, notably, Marquis de Lafayette, Sieyès, and even Mirabeau. We know that they were supporting to keep the king because they were part of the nobility, so part of the third estate now, part of the revolution. So now, but they still wanted to keep the king. Okay, so let's explain why the King Louis XVI was executed. So Louis XVI, treason and execution. First of all, correspondence with foreign powers. Louis XVI, facing growing discontent and the rise of revolutionary forces, sought support from foreign powers, particularly Austria and Prussia. Because why Austria? Because his wife, Marie Antoinette, was originally from Austria. So she was calling for the Papa to help. Papa, please help. His correspondence with these nations was intercepted, providing evidence of his treasonous activities. So you can imagine, as I was saying, it was a simple guy. Was a simple guy, a bit stupid on the side. Okay, it was not really clever. Okay, and he had a wife that was really manipulative. So you can imagine why he was writing these letters to the Austria monarch and to Prussia to help them because of the pressure of his wife. So now the flight to Varennes. In 1791, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette attempted to flee Paris, hoping to rally support from the foreign powers. So they were traveling east towards Austria and then to reach the line of the front that was the Revolutionary War fronts. And basically, he wanted to pass the line in order to get to the enemy. So, hoping to rally support from the foreign powers. However, they were captured and brought back to the city. So before reaching the front line, it was recognized because of a piece of money, and people recognized the face of Louis XVI, and they were brought back to Paris. This failed escape solidified the revolutionaries' belief in the king's treachery. So now they were saying, nah, he needs to be facing trial, and we'll decide what to do with him. These actions, combined with the growing radicalization of the revolution, so the reign of terror was growing in interest. So it led to the trial and conviction of Louis XVI. He was found guilty of treason and executed by guillotine on January 21, 1793. Now Marie Antoinette, imprisonment and execution. Marie Antoinette, the queen consort, was also arrested and imprisoned following the failed flight to Varennes. She was subjected to harsh conditions and faced accusations of treason and adultery. So she was naturally having a good life. She was not really happy with the simple king. She was enjoying life elsewhere. Okay. So the queen's trial. Marie Antoinette was tried and convicted of treason in October 1793. She was accused of inciting counter-revolutionary violence and having an affair with the king's bodyguards. On his execution, there were tons of songs and in the street, and people were happy to see her die. And the resentment against Marie Antoinette was massive. She was detested in France. And due to what she was saying, the claim I was mentioning when she said, well, they can't have any bread, they can have brioche. So that kind of things were putting that sort of claim put a perspective, a person. Okay. So Marie Antoinette was executed by guillotine on October 16, 1793. So a couple of months later, her husband death, a death along with that of her husband symbolized complete collapse of the monarchy. Now the aristocracy and the monarchy, especially the monarchy, was dead. The aristocracy was still there, was still having some influence, but the monarchy itself was dead. It will come back in another form later. This is why the history of the revolution, the revolution in France is tumultuous, because they were coming from democracy to the empire, to another democracy, to another empire, So it was really strange. The fate of the Dauphin. Okay, the young Dauphin, Louis XVII, was imprisoned following the arrest of his parent. So remember when I mentioned that later in the future there will be a Louis XVIII, it's because Louis XVII was in prison. He was only 7 years old. He was imprisoned following the arrest of his parent, separated completely from his parent. He suffered from ill health and was subjected to harsh treatment by his captors, beating, humiliation, treated like a dog. To me, it was really a victim of the situation. It was just a kid, and the young king died actually in captivity in 1795, likely due to a combination of illness, neglect, and abuse. He was always crying for his mama. He was always crying for his daddy. He was really close to his parent, actually. And it was really, I found that really tragic to see the death of such a young kid, and to cry every day for his parent. It was really tragic. So the death of Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette, and the Dauphin were tragic consequences of the French Revolution, because also they were acting stupidly instead of moving with the flow and accepting the changes that were happening before them. But because of to me, the stupidity of the king at the time, and the lack of capability to show authority and adequate authority, and understanding the change that was happening before him, it led to a revolution, and it led to the demise of the monarchy and the radical nature of the revolutionary movement. Now, the French Revolution, a turbulent transition. The French Revolution was marked by a period of instability and violence following the overthrow of the monarchy. The Reign of Terror, led by the Jacobins, resulted in mass execution and political repression. Napoleon Bonaparte emerged as a dominant figure and consolidating power and establishing a military dictatorship. That will be the consulate, okay? And that will lead to the empire, back to the monarchy. Legacy of the revolution: despite the authoritarian rule of Napoleon, the French Revolution had a profound impact on French society and politics. It abolished feudalism, slavery, established a system of civil rights, and introduced new concept of citizenship and equality. Now, coming back to a little bit on the society of the Friends of the Blacks and the Haitian Revolution. So this, in the same way we were talking about the Indian Americans, let's talk about the slaves and the Society of the Friends of the Blacks. The Society of the Friends of the Blacks, this French abolitionist organization, played a crucial role in raising awareness of the plight of enslaved Africans and advocating for their emancipation, which will be reached by 1794, as I said on multiple occasions. Now, the Haitian Revolution. This is quite interesting, and I will do a video in about 2 weeks on Haiti. So the Haitian Revolution, the successful slave rebellion in the French colony of Saint-Domingue, was originally called Saint-Domingue. Now it is Haiti. Nowadays it is Haiti. Was a direct consequence of the French Revolution ideals of liberty and equality. Led by Toussaint Louverture, the revolution resulted in the establishment of an independent Haiti in 1804. Now, it led to additional, situation that we will explain in the Haiti, subject and video that I will do in 2 weeks. Okay. I know we need to continue on the French Revolution because I said it's way deeper than the American Revolution. So now the French Revolution, from revolution to dictatorship. The French Revolution was a tumultuous period characterized by rapid shifts in power and ideology. While initially driven by ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, the revolution ultimately descended into a period of radicalism and violence. So the reign of terror, okay, the terror, as we call it. The Committee of Public Safety, established to combat counter-revolutionaries, wielded immense power and led to mass executions. So this is Robespierre. Okay. This period, known as the Reign of Terror, alienated many and created a desire for stability. It will lead to the Consulate period with Napoleon Bonaparte. Okay. So we do a small detour on the Reign of Terror and Robespierre now. The Reign of Terror was a period of radical violence and political repression that occurred during the French Revolution. It was characterized by the dominance of the Committee of Public Safety, a powerful body led by Maximilien Robespierre. The Committee of Public Safety was established in 1793 to respond to the growing threats facing the revolution. It was given a broad power to arrest suspected enemies of the revolution and to carry out trials and executions. But execution like you trialed in 2 minutes, we give you the sentence and you go under the guillotine after an hour. This was the way it was done. Now, Robespierre dominance. Robespierre, a radical Jacobin leader, emerged as the dominant figure within the committee. It was a fervent believer in revolutionary ideals and was determined to eliminate all opposition of the revolution. The cult of the supreme being. Robespierre promoted the cult of the supreme being. Robespierre promoted a cult of the supreme being, a deistic religion that sought to replace traditional Christianity. This move was intended to unite the nation and promote revolutionary values. Most of the people with certain distance say that this supreme being was not the figure of God, was actually Satan, and it was influenced by satanic kind of impulses. I don't know if it's true, but this is one of the rumor that was circulating about Robespierre, even though he was a was a he was a good person actually. The Reign of Terror. The Reign of Terror, which lasted from 1793 to 1794, was a period of intense political repression, but at the same time, they were ending slavery, so which is quite interesting. Thousands of people were arrested, tried, and executed, including both real and perceived enemies of the revolution. So with a period of instability like this, you know what's happening. You have a problem with your neighbor, or you have a problem with someone you dislike, and you're saying, "Well, he has non-revolutionary, ideals. He doesn't support the revolution." I heard him speaking, and his friend is saying, "Yes, I heard him speaking about this. He was speaking against Robespierre. He needs to be trialed." He goes under the trial, get executed. That was what was happening. Instability everywhere. He was totally crazy. Now, let's talk about the guillotine. The guillotine is a device that was used for execution at the time. So you see that picture about the guillotine, and you see the blade coming down at certain tremendous force, and then cutting the neck of the enemies. Okay, so the guillotine is a device designed by a guy that was named Guillotin. It was a device designed. You can see the face of that guy, Guillotin. A device designed for efficient execution. It was supposed to do not provide any suffering. Okay, so it became a symbol of the Reign of Terror, but it was used until the 20th century. By the way, it was only removed from usage after in 1950 or 1960, if I remember correctly. So thousands of people were sent to the guillotine, including members of the aristocracy, clergy, and ordinary citizens. So it was a cleansing, if I can call it that way. All people against the revolution, either real or perceived enemies, were passed under the guillotine. The targets of terror. The targets of terror, including not only enemies of the revolution, but also individuals who were suspected of disloyalty or dissent. If you just say something against the revolution, you go under the guillotine. The Committee of Public Safety sought to create an homogeneous society based on revolutionary principles. The fall of Robespierre. So now, when you're reaching a certain climate like this, it can't go on forever. Okay. The fall of Robespierre. Despite his dominance, Robespierre's policies eventually led to his downfall. His opponents within the National Convention, fearing of their own safety, orchestrated his arrest and execution in 1794. This marked the end of the Reign of Terror. Basically, they came into one of the official building, and Robespierre was there with his brother, and they were trying to arrest him. There was a movement of panic. Someone took a pistol, shot Robespierre in the face. Actually the bullet touched the face, and the entire lower part of the face was just removed, and it was bleeding like crazy. And do you imagine the pain and everything, and the entire lower part of the face was moved and almost destroyed, and it was only staying by only part of the flesh that was on the side of his face. So this was totally crazy. And also the tumultuous situation. There were fights between the people supporting Robespierre and against the people of the National Convention. So he was totally crazy. Now, Robespierre and Napoleon Bonaparte. This is really an interesting subject because Robespierre and Napoleon Bonaparte were contemporaries. So they were almost facing each other, not all the time. They were also working together on some level. But the relationship was complex and often adversarial. Political differences. Robespierre was a radical Jacobin who believed in popular sovereignty and democratic ideals. Napoleon, on the other hand, was a pragmatic military leader who ultimately sought to consolidate power and establish a dictatorship. From almost the get-go, when he became general, that's what he wanted to do. He was playing that step by step. Okay. Conflict and competition. Robespierre and Napoleon competed for influence within the revolutionary government. Napoleon's military successes and growing popularity posed a threat to Robespierre's dominance. Did it have anything to do with the arrest of Robespierre? I don't believe so. There may be some other proof of that, but I don't have any view of that. Now, let's go back to the transition of power, and that will be leading to Napoleon's coup d'état. The Directory, following the Reign of Terror, the Directory was established as a new form of government. However, it proved to be weak and ineffective, plagued by corruption and indecision. So this is always the case. When you have always a transition to another transition form of power, you have corruption everywhere, and also assassination and stuff like this. So Napoleon Bonaparte, a military hero who emerged during the Revolutionary Wars, seized power in a coup d'etat in 1799. As the first consul, he instituted a series of reforms, including the Napoleonic Code, which codified French law until today. The French law today was codified by Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte, during its consulate, implemented a series of significant reforms that had a lasting impact on French society and law. Some of the most notable reforms include education reform. He established a national education system promoting standardized education and meritocracy. Administrative reforms. He streamlined the administrative structure of France, creating a more efficient and centralized government. Economic reforms. He implemented economic reforms such as stabilizing the currency and promoting economic growth. While Napoleon's reforms were often driven by his desire to consolidate power in reality and establish a stable regime, they also had positive consequences. His reforms helped to modernize France and establish a more efficient and equitable system of government. The Directory, the government that succeeded the Committee of Public Safety, was a weak and unstable regime. It was plagued, as I said, by corruption, factionalism, and economic problems. The Directory's inability to effectively govern created a power vacuum that allowed Napoleon Bonaparte to seize control. If the Directory was strong, then Napoleon Bonaparte wouldn't have the capability to seize control. Okay, so Napoleon coup d'état. So let's explain what it is. Napoleon orchestrated the coup d'état known as the 18 Brumaire. This coup dissolved the Directory and established a new government, the Consulate, with Napoleon as the first consul. Consolidation of power. Napoleon quickly consolidated his power, malaying the other consuls and eventually becoming the sole ruler. He justified his action as necessary to restore order and stability to France. Corruption and nepotism. While Napoleon Bonaparte was known for his administrative abilities and reforms, his regime was not immune to corruption. He appointed friends and family members to positions of power. For example, his brother Joseph was named regent of Naples in Italy, and before getting moved into Spain, Napoleon arrested two potential successors of the Spanish throne, to put Joseph on top of it and to declare him, king of Spain. This is typically what the kind of things he was doing. His brother Lucian was also nominated as Minister of the Interior, so Secretary of State for the interior of France. So it's typically what he was doing, the kind of thing, these kind of things. Additionally, his military campaigns and the need to finance his government led to increased taxation and economic hardship. Always, the economic hardship was on who? The lesser classes. Yes, the feudal system doesn't exist anymore, but it's still in use, right? Because the lesser classes are still getting, exploited. So transition to empire. Napoleon's ambition extended beyond domestic reforms. His military conquest and the desire to establish a dynastic empire led him to crown himself emperor in 1804. This marked the end of the revolutionary era and the beginning of Napoleonic France. You see what I mean? The French Revolution while initially inspired by revolutionary ideals, ultimately deviated from its original course. Naturally, because he wanted to, fill his pocket, right? So corruption at all levels. The instability and violence of the period, coupled with the ambitions of figures like Napoleon, led to the establishment of a dictatorship. It was naturally evolving to that state, right? So despite his corruption, mass murders perpetrated across Europe during the Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars would estimate gives the number of 2 million dead on the French side alone, 700,000 after 1815, and about 1 million dead just between 1812 and 1814. You imagine? It was a butcher. That is why, this rumor about being the first Antichrist. And Nostradamus predicted the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. It was, yes, as I said, even named as the first Antichrist by Nostradamus. Nonetheless, he produced the French Code of Law. So you can be a butcher on one side, doing what an Antichrist would do, and doing something great. The Napoleonic Code. So the Napoleonic Code, I just wanted to come back on it because it was a famous document that was supposedly written by Napoleon. I don't believe it was entirely his dues, but but basically it is called nonetheless the Napoleonic Code because it was really, one of the major author of it. But the Napoleonic Code is a comprehensive civil code promulgated by Napoleon Bonaparte in 1804, had a significant impact on French law and influenced legal systems in many other countries. Indeed, if you think about it, there's multiple European countries that were using the Napoleonic Code as a base. Today, Mauritius is still using the Napoleonic Code, part of it. Now you have also other systems in the world that were using the Napoleonic Code in the Middle East, but also in Latin America. Okay, so this was a good example of how influential that was. So what was it? First of all, the key provisions. The code addressed a wide range of legal matters, including property rights, contract, marriage, and inheritance. It was designed to promote legal clarity, uniformity, and efficiency. Impact on the French society. The Napoleonic Code helped to modernize France's law and reduce the influence of feudal privileges. It was also meant to promote equality and individualism. Equality not for everyone, because in 1802 Napoleon reenacted the slavery. So the slavery was reinitiated, part of the French in the French colonies. So equality not for everyone. International influence. The code's principle, as I said, and provisions were adopted by many countries, including parts of Europe, Latin America, and Middle East. The Napoleonic Code remains a significant legal document and a testament in Napoleon's legacy, intelligence, and a vision as a reformer, but nonetheless a butcher. Mini conclusion, the aftermath. Okay. Now we've covered a lot, okay, especially for the French Revolution. But the American and French Revolution, while sharing similar goals of liberty and equality, distinct outcomes for Native Americans and enslaved Africans. While both groups faced oppression and dispossession, the experience was shaped in different historical context and political realities. Yes, indeed, American and Indians were in the way of expanding USA, and slavery was necessary in order to fill the coffers of France and fill the coffers of Napoleon Bonaparte. So it was both slavery were abolished by the USA in 1794 and by the France in 1794. I guess there was a discussion between the two nations to align themselves on that subject. But with the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte in 1802, the reactivation of slavery was made in order to ensure, as I said, consistent revenue streams coming from the colonies, and also because some states in US were continuing to take advantage of slavery. Native Americans who had long inhabited the land were displaced and marginalized by both colonial powers and the newly independent nations. They faced forced relocation, loss of land, and attacks on their cultural traditions. In contrast, enslaved Africans in the French colonies fought and achieved abolition. This is naturally correct for Haiti, albeit temporarily, because now in 1802, this is what happened. The Haitian Revolution is a direct consequence of the French Revolution, establishing an independent nation based on the principles of liberty and equality for enslaved people. Once again, I will do a video in 2 weeks about Haiti. I need to prepare for it because it's a heavy subject. In terms of corruption, both revolutions faced challenges in combating this pervasive issue in the American Revolution, notably corruption. Scandals such as the Yazoo Land Act and the Burr conspiracy exposed weakness in the young republic's governance. But it has still nothing to do with what happened in France. In France, it was horrible. Similarly, the French Revolution was largely plagued with corruption, assassination, execution, terror, particularly during the Reign of Terror, the Directory, and the early years of Napoleon's rule. Because during the Napoleon's rule, corruption was part of the scheme. It was part of the system. If you want to be part of the system, corruption is part of it. So there was no problem afterward because it was simply a way that was making the system to work. So this is why on the early years, people were just, they were raising their voices against corruption, but once Napoleon was in place, stability was ensured. So in that case, corruption was all over the place. While both revolutions sought to establish just and equitable societies, the realities of power, patronage, and economic interest often undermined these ideals. Nonetheless, the transition from independence, war of independence, to a democratic republic, and a consistent view towards republic and democracy stayed consistent for the entire duration of the USA existence. While in France, it was a different story. As I could tell you, it was a very different story. So that's what I could tell you about the aftermath. I know this was a long section, and I'll see you in the Global Impact Complex Legacy.